In the late 19th and early 20th century, as American public school systems were growing, a new profession emerged, that of the music supervisor. In larger school systems, the music supervisor would supervise the teaching of music by general classroom teachers in grammar school and teach the more advanced music courses at the high school level. At this time, few middle-class women worked. In the teaching field, one of the few pathways available to women, the general pattern was for women to teach and men to supervise. Yet when music supervisors from around the U.S. met to form a professional organization, 44 out of 69, or 64%, were women. This initial meeting in 1907 was led by a woman, Frances Elliott Clark, who would go on to be a national leader in the field and is still known as the mother of the association. Other women at this meeting, such as Bertie Alexander of Dallas, Texas, and Elsie Shaw of Minneapolis, were similarly influential in the development of the field. How did this domination of a new professional field by women occur in a world where professional opportunities for women were so few? I argue that this was due to the legacy of parlor music and the strong association it created between music and the female gender. In 18th century America, musical training was an important part of an upper-class young woman's education and usually involved learning to play a keyboard instrument such as harpsichord, clavichord, or spinet. Toward the end of the 18th century, these were replaced by the forte piano, which developed into the piano as we know it today. Mass production of the piano and later of parlor organs made the instruments and traditions of parlor music available to middle-class families toward the end of the 19th century. An entire genre of music was developed to provide upper and middle-class parlor performers, mainly women, with appropriate music. Interesting enough to demonstrate skill, yet easy enough for the performer to demonstrate ease and grace while playing, avoiding serious or deeply passionate subjects, focusing on birds, flowers, springtime, home and hearth, poor orphans, and the sentimentalized plantation. Military songs to support soldiers at war were acceptable. Subjects like women's suffrage and abolition appeared only rarely. The instruments themselves had a female association. Mentions of keyboard instruments in letters, journals, and diaries were often connected to female relatives, as in this excerpt from a letter written by Thomas Jefferson ordering a new instrument for his wife Martha. Even the parlor spaces that these instruments occupied had a female association. According to Sarah Gentry Glosson in her master's thesis, this space was crucial for the semi-public performance of femininity because so many other spaces were dominated by masculinity. This was therefore a special place in which women could express their female identity. Upper-class young women's diaries from the late 1700s show that music was a daily part of their lives, woven in with chores such as sewing and gathering eggs, that it played a part in romantic courtship, and that a woman's music skill came with an obligation to perform in social settings. This association of parlor music, instruments, and spaces with the female gender and keyboard skills woven into the daily lives and social expectations for respectable women leads to the development of professional pathways for women, private piano teaching, then teaching in schools, seminaries, and public school classrooms. 19th century news sources, especially advertisements, provide a chronicle of this transition. Because of time limits, I will only share a few. In the early 19th century, though formal schools for girls were being established in every major city, women's teaching opportunities at first continued to be home-based. For example, in 1816, this ad in the New York Advocate seeks a female teacher for a genteel family to teach music and academic subjects, presumably in the home. In 1847, Lowell Mason, seen by many as the founder of American music education, ran an ad for a teachers' institute which invited both male and female teachers. This follows an interesting pattern that had played out earlier in the century in general education, an increase in formal schooling of women, leading eventually to an increase in female classroom teachers. Finally, in 1849, a female music teacher is listed in an ad for a school in the Brattleboro Semi-Weekly Eagle. And in 1851, the Clarksville, Texas Standard also lists a female music teacher on school staff. In the last 20 years of the 1800s, there is an increase in female music teachers advertising on their own behalf, such as in 1884, Ms. R.M. Washington advertising her easy and progressive lesson book and listing herself as teacher of music and organist of the 12th Baptist Church in Boston, Massachusetts. Moving into the early 1900s, an article describing a particularly notable example with many intersectional connections stands out. Colonel Lewis's daughter graduates from the New England Conservatory of Music in the 1901 Washington Bee. The accompanying article praises Julia Ellen Lewis for her accomplishments, including graduating from the New England Conservatory of Music and teaching in the New Orleans public schools since 1863. Julia Ellen Lewis was the daughter of Colonel James Lewis, the U.S. Surveyor General. He himself was the son of an enslaved woman and a white planter. This article hints at a much larger story involving Jim Crow, the New Orleans Creole population, and expanding educational and professional opportunities for African American women that this short presentation does not allow time to explore. Julia's story also provides evidence of the many women moving into public school teaching in the last decades of the 1800s in the United States, as public schools, first known as common schools, and school systems were being founded. Though in the 1830s men outnumbered women in American public schools, by the 1860s women teachers were the majority in some states, and by 1870, thanks to the Civil War, women teachers were in the majority. As school systems grew, hierarchies developed in the teaching field, echoing male dominance typical of the general culture. Men moved into roles as head teachers, teaching older students. These roles developed into supervisory positions, the typical pattern being for women teachers to be supervised by men. In music, as the need emerged for more music supervisors, the parlor music tradition ensured that among the teachers of every district and in the larger community were women with the requisite skills. The strong cultural association between music and the female gender meant that administrators and school boards felt it was natural to turn to women when musical expertise was needed. Women stepped up and quickly became involved in the developing field on the local and national level. The parlor music tradition and the public school music teaching field provide an example of the molding of limits imposed by society into professional advantage by enterprising women pioneers. I've chosen to end with two of those pioneers, Bertie Alexander and Frances Clark. Thank you so much for listening. I look forward to your questions and comments.